This video is proudly sponsored by Gamersgate. Download games anytime, anywhere. Visit Gamersgate.com.
Hello everybody and welcome back to Elder Geeks Game Club. This is episode number 34, Super Castlevania 4. I'm your host Steve, and with me as always is Phil. Phil, how are you doing tonight?
Very good. How are you?
I'm doing exceptional, thank you. Randy is with us as well. Randy, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing well, and I have a question for you both.
Oh.
Yes.
Were your efforts enough to exhaust Dracula and his minions, or did you suffer from some limp whip syndrome?
No, of course I
I've been saving that one up for like a week.
No,
There's no way I could have gone in like 5 minutes into the show without doing that.
Well, yeah. At this stage of my life, the whip has gotten a little limp, but I have in the past vanquished Dracula, but so once again,
Which, by the way, we're playing Castlevania 4.
for those of you who might be joining us for the first time, what we do on the Game Club is we pick a game, usually a retro, indie, or a classic title. We'll play it for a couple of weeks, and then we reconvene here on the internet, and we do this podcast where we discuss the game in kind of a book club kind of style. I guess it's not really an official review. We just kind of share what we thought of it, what we liked, what we didn't like, and then we ask our audience to get involved and let us know what they thought as well, to varying degrees of success. And this time around, we did play Castlevania 4, also known as Super Castlevania 4, for the Super Nintendo. And Phil, why don't you go ahead and give us your history lesson on the game?
Sure, it's going to be a short one. We did Symphony of the Night this time last year for our Halloween game, and I forgot that was when we used to do the polls, and this was actually against Symphony of the Night. So here we are, a year later, finally doing Castlevania 4.
Nice.
Yeah, it's good. It felt good waiting that year. Well, it didn't feel good waiting.
It's kind of amazing. It's been a year, actually.
I know.
I think about it.
It's crazy. So I looked over the notes because I wasn't sure. I thought I smartly only, if I do say so myself, only covered Symphony of the Night in the history because Castlevania is such a large beast of a series that it'd be impossible to cover everything.
Yeah,
so
it has
here
a very rich history.
Oh yeah. So in this case, I'm only really talking about just Castlevania 4 here.
Okay.
Which actually, surprisingly, there is not too much to say about it. It was originally released on the Super Nintendo, as we said, in December of 1991, which is, I guess, kind of like considered launch window, as they say now. They never used to say that then, but a few months after the SNES released. And it was only re-released one time on the Virtual Console in 2006. So, this game didn't get repackaged a bunch of times like most of the other Castlevania games, and only available on Nintendo systems as well. So despite the fact that it's called Castlevania 4, it's actually a remake of the original game. The Japanese version is called, I'm probably going to butcher the name of it, but Akumajo Dracula. It's actually not even Dracula, it's spelled differently, but that's what it translates into. So Devil Castle Dracula, something like that.
Okay.
I should have written that down. And that's actually the same exact title as the original Castlevania. So it's for all purposes, this is a remake of the original Castlevania. Same story. It's not moving anything forward. Simon Belmont doing his thing. And I added this note in, so this is going to get a little confusing. The first N64 game in the Castlevania series, there's two of them, was simply titled Castlevania. So that actually was just called Castlevania, but that is its own thing. That is not a remake. It just shares the same name. The Japanese version of the game is called Castlevania Apocalypse. Well, really, Akumajo Dracula Apocalypse. So I just thought that was kind of weird. Just the way the naming conventions work for these games. Which, by the way, did you guys ever play the 64 ones before?
I haven't.
I played the 64 one for like 2 seconds and then stopped. I was like, nope.
You hated it that much then?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Yeah, I got to like the first skeleton, which you're not very far in, and I was like, no. I mean,
Wow.
I was always really kind of dubious of the early 3D games.
Yeah,
Like,
that's all there
were early
was.
3D games that were good, like Mario 64 and Zelda 64, and then there was a lot of early 3D games that were just bad, and
I guess
Castlevania was one of them.
You must not have played a lot of games in those times. That's all there was. That's all.
I still played a fair share. The N64 had some cool platformers. Not to like go off on a tangent, but the Banjo-Kazooie, series on the N64 was great. And I don't know. I remember I played more than my fair share of the cruising games on the N64 as well.
Oh boy.
Plus
Cruising.
Turok. So many hours of Turok.
Which one?
The original.
Yeah. I like the original. I don't know if I'd like it if I went back to it now, but I remember being pumped for 2, and 2 was such a turd. Bought it the day
Yeah,
it
2
came
was
out.
the only thing cool about 2 was the cerebral bore.
Yeah,
you know?
that was cool. And the fact that it ran at like 5 frames per second. But anyway.
It is kind of and I don't mean to get us off on a tangent, but when you think about classic game, since we're talking about a classic game, it's kind of funny that like kind of back then, like a lot of times, like you can name a lot of sequels that were just horrible. Whereas now in modern days, it seems like the first game comes out and it's like a proof of concept, and then the sequel comes
Right.
out and it's way better than the original, and it's like they're building on these iterations of a game. Whereas back then it was like this awesome game would come out and then a sequel would come out and it would be just a pile of crap.
Yeah. Looking at you, Assassin's Creed and Gears of War.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So anyway, that was just a little
Oh,
aside.
yeah. So then there is Castlevania Chronicles, which is a 2001 PlayStation 1 port of a 1993 Sharp, I'm not even going to bother, X6800,000 game. Some PC, some Japanese PC platform thing.
That's great.
that
Great
I'm-
branding. I like that.
Yeah, that I am not familiar with. And that game, I'm bringing that one up because that is also a retelling of the original Castlevania. So this game has been remade many, many, many times. And really, the first NES Castlevania, it's not in my notes, but I just know off the top of my head, was there was like I think MSX version, and I forget which
Yeah.
one came first, but that was almost a completely different game. And then there's Haunted Castle, which is the arcade version of Castlevania.
Yes.
And
I
that-
remember that one, actually.
Yeah, and that is also like a remake of Castlevania.
And I remember the main character. I don't remember what his name was, but he was gigantic on the screen in Haunted
Yeah,
Castle.
he's Simon, I think.
He was Simon?
I believe he's Simon.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that somebody in the comments will actually correct us
Correct
if
me.
we're wrong, but that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah, I believe he's Simon. That game is hard as shit.
Yes, it was.
I tried to complete that one. I had it obviously on MAME, and I can remember playing it for hours, and I just couldn't. I couldn't do it for the life of me. It's so hard. Yeah. So, and then Randy added a note in here. This is the first Castlevania to feature Slogra and Gaibon. Am I saying them right?
I don't know. I say Slogger and Gaibon, but hey,
Gaibon.
people will know who we're talking about. The
Yeah.
pterodactyl spearman and the gargoyle dude. They're always together.
Well, they because of this game, they were always together.
Yeah.
They were just separate. It's funny because you fight Slogra first, and then you fight Gaibon second. But in like Symphony of the Night, they paired them up. I'll never forget that either. In Symphony of the Night, when they threw both of them at you, and you're like, "Holy shit, this is hardcore!" Because
Yeah.
they got both of them. That's actually like one of the hardest fights in the game, I think, too, in Symphony, because you're like
it's really early
underpowered.
on and you're super
Yeah.
underpowered. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a tough fight. I can remember being kind of stuck at it when I first played that. All right, so our thoughts on Super Castlevania. I just spoke greatly, so one of you two go ahead.
Steve looks absolutely ecstatic. So let's go with it. He's bubbling over.
This Castlevania is probably my favorite Castlevania, and now granted, I don't have a ton of experience with the more contemporary games at all. Actually, I think I played one of the PlayStation 2 ones, and it was like a Devil May Cry clone, and
This is a piece of
hated it.
shit. No matter which one you played, it's a piece of shit.
Right. Okay. So good. So I haven't missed anything. That's good. To know.
I liked Lament of Innocence, but Phil and I had this discussion before the show. The other one was a piece of crap.
I'm gonna borrow a little bit from something Phil wrote years ago, and that for me, this Castlevania. One of the things I love about it is it still feels like Castlevania to me. It doesn't. Simon is still like a big like barbarian dude, and he's he just seems a lot tougher. And like you were saying in the arcade game, he's like he's huge. He's a good fighter. He doesn't have this whole layer of the whole. I'm not a fan of where they went with the series with the whole like anime ladyboy thing. I just didn't really dig that too much, and so this game to me kind of is the highlight of the series, really, in terms of like sticking to that original early Castlevania feel, and it's the game that I identify with the series the most. Personally, I'm not saying that it is the best in the series. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but for me, this is the one that kind of sticks out. As I was sitting down and playing it, it was just like I remembered everything, and it all just came back to me, and it just, all the jumps and everything felt natural. I think that this game has just some of the tightest controls of any game, really, from that time period. And it just kind of, not only does it sum up Castlevania for me, but it really kind of sums up the Super Nintendo. This game, along with, like, ActRaiser, which we played in an earlier game club, if you didn't catch it, are kind of the two games that really just sum up the Super Nintendo for me, as far as my memory goes. I mean, 1991 and ActRaiser was 93, right?
No,
that was 91 also. They were both around the same time.
I believe 91.
I would think so. Yeah.
I forget. Yeah. Well, so like right around that time, the age I was at and everything, it just kind of that was like the Super Nintendo to me. I kind of lost track of the series after that. But this is easily my favorite one.
You see what you're saying about the whole this is the Super Nintendo, because even for a launch title, it was still even from the beginning until the end of the Super Nintendo's life cycle, it was one of the best ones, one of the best games that actually existed on that console. And I actually still stand by the fact that I think this actually has one of the best soundtracks in any video game ever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I actually still, when I'm just having a day where I need to hear something in the background and I can just kind of work through the music, a lot of times I'll actually play the Super Castlevania 4, soundtrack. It's not very long, but it's, it's kind of fun to listen to. It's almost like entertainment for your brain while you're doing work kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, I love the soundtrack. I always listen to it. It's
and
awesome.
I think I made this comment on our Facebook page as well. I really think that this game, more than any other game out there, I really think that this one, there's something totally Halloweenish about it. Like, it seems to fit the time of the year. It seems to fit fall perfectly. It seems to fit the holiday perfectly. And it's just a ton of fun because it goes through all the classic monsters. It has the Frankenstein monster, it has the Mummy, and it has, of course, Dracula, and then there's Death, and then Medusa is in it as well. So it's a ton of fun, and the setting is perfect. One of my favorite things about this game has always been, even though it was a remake of the original, how they start you back further in distance from the castle. The original one starts you just outside of the castle in the courtyard with the torches and the statues. This one starts you further back out to like the gates of Dracula's estate, and you work through his stables, and then you work through like the swamp area just outside, and then up like the waterfall. And it's not just your experience within the castle. It's like your assault on all of Dracula's territory, and I loved that. Yeah, there you have it. That's my thoughts. It's a near perfect game. It really is.
Well, I could probably keep going.
I could too, but I wanted to pass the ball a little bit. I'm sure I could gush more later.
That's fine. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's how it's just one of the great Super Nintendo games. I agree. It's crazy how something so polished could come so early in the console's life cycle. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, looks-wise, when you look at it, I think it looks great still, but like the color palette on it's really weird. Like it's very dark for a Super Nintendo game, very muted, almost Genesis like color palette, which is it's kind of strange. It almost makes me wonder if they were developing it maybe not on Super Nintendo at first or something. I don't know. This is just throwing stuff around.
Maybe for the X6800.
Some odd thing. Yeah, I don't know. It's strange to me, but I love it. I think it works. It just doesn't.
Yeah, the level of detail going on in all the environments is pretty astounding, especially like when you're walking through and then, the backgrounds, there's like 3 layers of backgrounds scrolling independently,
so
and there's little animated things going on back there that just... Yeah,
and people don't realize how awesome and original that was at the time to be having that like multi-tiered background where there were actually things animated in the background. That was big shit back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
there's even that. I was picking up on a couple of little details playing through it this time. I think it's stage 4. There's that mini boss. It's that skull that comes down and it has
the
like
almond skull.
Yeah, and it has like the crazy tongue, and then like it breathes just like grossness at you, and as it does that, it starts melting the wall. As it and I was like, that's like a cool, like it's cool that they thought of that. It's cool that they thought, let's have this shit melt the wall as it, people didn't think about that kind of stuff back then. And even the in the treasury, the bat that's made out of gold, he starts dropping like little coins, and the coins, like when they hit the ground, they actually spin out for a second, and then you watch. It's cool. It's just like these neat little effects that I think at the time and even today, like they just go a long way, and you can tell that these people were like really caring about this game as they were developing it. And another thing I think is really great about this game too is you can really tell that they enjoyed playing with the Super Nintendo itself. Like all the Mode 7 stuff and those in early, even I would say through most of the SNES life cycle, Mode 7 was just used, which, by the way, if you're not familiar, Mode 7 is the scaling trick that the Super Nintendo used. A lot of those games just use that.
Most popularly used in, like, Mario Kart or some of the mid-levels on, like, the Super Star Wars games.
Right. It was used for that, or, like, title screens. They would just have, like, the logo zoom in your face, and, that was about it. But Castlevania actually used it for, like, cool, like, game sequences. Like, there's the rotating rooms. There's the first one where you have to latch on to there's these anchor points you can latch onto your whip, and the whole room just kind of slowly rotates, and then it drops you, and then you got to fight a bunch of Medusa heads off, and then you have to latch on again, and the room rotates. I think that stage is like really it's an awesome idea, and playing it again, I feel like they could have done more with that stage, but it's even cool that they just did it at all. Like it's just a cool stage.
I think you're right. I think it was a lot of like playing around with the Mode 7 stuff that the SNES could do.
Right.
I mean,
good.
I was gonna say at the time you could really tell they were pushing what they could do with the SNES's processor and everything, because even now you'll get some massive slowdown on those Mode 7 maps when, if you whip a candle and then a skeleton and they blow up. And the slowdown, if that happened in the game today, as reviewers, we would probably lambaste the shit out of the game. Like, there was slowdown all the time because there's too many enemies on screen. But back then, and even now, as I play those stages and I, like, whip a skeleton and it explodes in slow motion, I always thought that was really cool. Like, I thought I was doing something I totally did. Like,
meanwhile,
it
was
badass. It needs to be seen in slow motion.
Meanwhile, it was like the SNES just, like, chugging along, trying so hard, getting everything it could out of that little processor. Hence the blast processing, by the way, that Sega was able to throw around.
What Nintendo?
Yeah, all their games were coming to a crawl. Yeah, the slowdown in Castlevania is a little rough, but it's nowhere near as bad as like Gradius 3 or something like that, like another Konami game. But and then there's the other rotating room that you're running through, and the bridge is falling behind you. And that one's more of like an effect just to show you how awesome it is. But at the same time, they still add like their skeletons are bursting out of the background as it scrolls, and it's just like a cool effect. But then there's the chandelier stage, which is awesome because they're literally, I mean, it kind of looks like shit. You can tell they're taking like this little 25 by 25 pixel chandelier and blowing it up the entire screen. But they're using like Mode 7 to rotate the chandelier, and you need to jump on it. And it's just cool that they were, thinking of fun like ways to work Mode 7 into the just the design of the game.
Plus, you could totally tell that they did that to one-up themselves from Castlevania 3 in that moment, because in Castlevania 3 you had that awesome moment where you were jumping onto the pendulum, and you had to do it twice, but they were like, well, how do we up the pendulum scene, and then
they thought of
do
it.
Chandelier,
they did it.
And which
And
is
then
really cool. Even if, I always love the fact that when you're doing that stage, the stage with the chandelier, like if you mentally map it out in your brain, you're walking below the ballroom, where
Right.
there's dancers and there's tables and everything like that, and you climb up the stairs on the right-hand side, and then you go left across the quote-unquote ballroom where these giant chandeliers would mentally exist. They would be hanging over the ballroom, and I always loved that somebody
it's
took
great.
the time to think that kind of thing through.
Yeah, like the level design, like everything kind of makes sense.
Exactly. It all flowed perfectly together.
The whole game is actually like that. When you're going from one thing to the next, it all makes sense. It's cool. There's this website called, I think it's called VG Maps. I may have spoke about it before on a previous game club, but when you look at a lot of these old game maps, it's so awesome to see how they thought. Like how the developers, like when you're running through these stages, you're not really thinking about it too much, but like, I don't know, look at the first stage of Chip 'n Dale Rescue Rangers for Nintendo, for example. Like, if you go to this site and look at it, it's just cool to see how you're running through these buildings. You're like running through like a small town, and you're climbing up these foam poles, and you're not thinking much of it when you're doing it in the game, but you're actually climbing up like foam poles that you've seen earlier in the game, stuff like that. Like, it's just cool how you can see how the developers thought about the stage layouts. It wasn't just this mishmash of just whatever. At least in the good games, and the ones that
it wasn't just throw challenge at player and who cares what the background element it was. There was thought process to it.
Right. And yeah, Castlevania 4, just the whole, like you said, the whole journey, like the whole thing makes sense. It's great.
Yeah, I even love when you fight the knight who's in that the encased glass. Like when you defeat him, the floor breaks out from underneath you and you fall into the dungeons. And right at the beginning of the next stage, you actually have you see Simon fall just a little bit to signify that he fell down into the dungeon.
And then even the map before that, the map shows like the slight drop that he takes. It's cool. It's just all really well thought out. It's great.
I love those little sequences too in between the levels when that little bit of music plays. It's like that very Baroque sounding music, and it shows you the dots go and show you where you've traveled. I love that. Yeah, there's just so many nice touches in this game like that just, man, it really is like the perfect game for this time of year too.
Oh yeah, I had a blast. I had a blast playing through it. It was great.
The first time I played through it, I kind of rushed because I was under the impression that we were going to be doing this game last week, but then we did Colorblind, and so I played as quick as I could, and I captured some footage for that, and then I played it again live for our charity stream, and I finished the game on the charity stream, and I was really surprised at especially in the later stages how much muscle memory kind of comes back for some of the old jumps. Especially the very final stage just before the end bosses, where there's these really wicked flying platforms you have to jump on that start from the lower left hand side of the screen, and they zoom up to the top right hand side of the screen, and they give the player zero warning for the spikes that are about to basically stick you in the head. But literally my first try, I just nailed the jumps. And I was like, that was kind of weird.
Yeah, I felt the same way. When we were talking earlier and I said that there's going to be times where I get hung up, that was the state. I was expecting to die there so many times, and I did it on my first try. It was crazy.
Yeah, I actually got hung up on the actual bosses, and I was actually happy to have the chat there with me to help me out with the bosses because I actually learned a new trick in fighting Death, which I'm probably going to remember from here on how to actually fight Death. And then I completely forgot how to fight Slogra, and I don't know how I forgot this, but I actually forgot that super secret giant stash just before Dracula himself, where you jump down to the left and they dump a bunch of fried chicken hearts and triple boomerangs on you.
That visual, I don't know, it was funny. Dump a bunch of fried chicken on you. That was where I got Randy, I told you I almost beat the game without continuing, and I said I fell off the steps. I was going to get the secret stash.
Yeah.
And I forgot how to get the secret stash. I forgot that I had to jump, and I thought there were stairs, and I fell right off the edge. And I was like, "Fuck!"
Yeah, 2 jumps. I think even if you know that the steps are there, I think there's something wonky with the programming in the game that it actually won't let you walk down those stairs. Maybe I don't know, but But yeah,
Which-
2 jumps to the left and you get fried chicken dumped on your head.
Which reveals, by the way, that I cheated to fight Dracula.
But see,
I
that's
deserve
not a
it.
cheat. Somebody was saying, "Oh, that's a cheat." I would call that a cheat if you like typed in a code that gave you all that kind of stuff. That stuff was built in the game. That's a secret in the game.
It's a secret. It's true. But you know what it does for you, and you know that.
Totally OP. Dracula was actually whooping my ass before I refound that stash.
Oh,
and then
really?
Oh yeah, he whooped my ass hardcore.
He's not too bad because he actually feeds you during the fight. So
He does, and what was funny is I forgot that he feeds you. Like he has those fine little laser.
yeah, he
fruit
gives you
cups.
the orb.
Yeah, the orbs. And I was actually dodging them like an idiot instead of trying to whip them to make drumsticks. And
Yeah.
but out of all the Draculas in all the Castlevania games, he's easily the easiest.
He is definitely the easiest. And when I was younger, I can remember being kind of like, you fight, you get his second form, and then they start playing the theme of Simon Belmont music. I can remember being kind of
they
like
start playing
disappointed
the Vampire
with
Slayer
that.
or Vampire Killer music. Yeah,
Or no, it's not. It's the. Is it the Vampire Killer music? I thought that was
pretty sure
the
it is.
original theme. It's the Simon theme. It's the theme from the first stage. Well, whatever. It doesn't.
I thought that song was actually called Vampire Killer.
No, Vampire Killer, I think, is the theme from the first one or Castlevania 2, I forget.
It's in like all Castlevanias.
Yeah,
That's the
it's
thing.
in
Like
all.
all the Castlevanias have a remix of Vampire Killer.
Yeah. That one's in pretty much all of them.
Yeah. But anyway, so I know what you're talking about. They pump you
Yeah,
up
so
and
they start
play
playing the
that
theme, and I can remember being like disappointed that they didn't play like new music.
Mm.
But I love it now. I actually think that's like a cool touch to get you like pumped up, because like you're trying to be triumphant in that moment. And he's actually kind of a bit of a pushover at that point. Like that's when he gets easy is on his second form. So you're feeling kind of good about yourself. So I like that touch. It's cool that they did that.
2 forms, though, by the way. That's got to be, like, the least number of forms that Dracula has in any of them. Because I even remember in, like, Castlevania 3, he has, like, 3 forms, maybe even 4.
He definitely has the one where he's just Dracula, and then he has the thing where he becomes the faces that, like,
With the
throw up
floating
on
blocks
you.
and crap.
Yeah, and then he's got that big demon. So I think there's 3. Right?
I was never able to... all truth be told, I was never able to finish the original Castlevania without a Game Genie.
Oh, the original? The first one?
Yeah, the very first one. I could beat 3
really?
if I had Grant in my party, but not the original one.
Wow, it is hard. That game's actually kind of easy until you get to Dracula. Like, I can blitz through that game in probably like 20 minutes.
Says
then
the guy
and
who
then-
can, like, do Contra with one guy. Or
Yeah.
one continue.
Oh yeah,
Game's easy.
but then I spend an hour fighting Dracula, like an hour. Like that is just infuriating. That part. In fact, when I go back and I play that game,
Yeah.
I usually just turn it off when I get to Dracula. Like I'll fight Dracula, I'll fight him like twice, and I'm like, okay, I'm done because I know I'll be there for another hour.
But even compared to the other bosses, like Dracula and the Mummy are total pushovers in that. Like,
Yeah.
The tougher bosses in that game are definitely... Actually, most of the bosses in that game are a little bit of a pushover.
Especially if you got like triple boomerangs, they're dead. They don't even get a chance to walk.
Yeah. Yeah, the most frustrating part about Super Castlevania 4 is whenever you got that power-up. You know, the power-up that you didn't want.
Yeah,
Like,
that
double
was happening a
boomerangs,
lot.
and you'd suddenly end up with, like, the dagger or some shit.
Yeah.
I actually like the dagger, but when you pick up the dagger from double boomerangs or triple boomerangs, you're like...
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention that kind of adds a layer of, I don't want to say suspense, but it's kind of like when you have that weapon that you're just kicking ass with and you love it, and then you hit a torch or something, and you have that split second as you're like in the air jumping towards the new weapon, and you're just like,
and you know.
you're like no, and then it's too late. Then you got it, and you you get like the water bottles or something. And
Yeah, and you're like, I would have rather died than that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Holy Water.
yeah,
Speaking of the oh no moments, this game has a ton of, as I call it to myself, spit slurper moments where you're like making this jump and you go, you know. I found myself doing it like a million times last night. I was like, just like praying that I land the jump, or
Yeah, the waterfall for particular, like the final jump on part of the waterfall where you like jump up onto like that pagoda or whatever to go fight Medusa.
Yeah.
That is probably the hardest jump in the entire game right there.
Yeah, there's definitely some tricky jumps. I think the difficulty on this one is actually really good too. Like I think it would be for someone that has never played it, I think they'd have a hard time but eventually they would prevail with by playing it.
It's very fair.
Exactly, it's very fair.
Yeah, it's not. There's no like cheap shit going on.
Yeah, whereas I don't really think, especially Castlevania 3, I don't really think the earlier ones are very fair at all times.
No. No, they're not.
And I've seen arguments, especially I'll bring up my buddy Ego Raptor did a video. He's got a sequelitis series, he calls it, and he did one where it was like Castlevania 4 versus the original Castlevania, and he kind of goes into some game theory as to why, if I remember correctly, I meant to watch it again before I played this. Or actually, I meant to watch it again after I played it because I didn't want it to affect my opinion of the game as I played it. And he kind of goes into like game theory as to why he believes that the choices in the original Castlevania benefit that one versus choices made in Castlevania 4. And I think he raises some alright points, but where was I going with this? So difficulties. So he goes into things like how the long whip and the way you can just kind of do whatever you want with it makes the game too easy, and it eliminates the use for power-ups. And that when I first watched that a while ago, that thought kind of stuck with me, especially when I played through the game again. I was like, well, let's see if he's right. Let's see how worthless the power-ups are in this game. And I found myself using like the power-ups all the time.
Really?
Like, yeah, you aren't using them very much?
As a Castlevania player, like in any of the Castlevania games, I rarely use my power-ups. It's just something I mentally do.
You save them for the boss?
I save them for the boss. And I have this weird mental saving, habit that I do, that I don't use my power-ups at all, like during the gameplay, unless I need to. Like there's a part where you're swinging across the gap, and there's like a skeleton like right at the other end of the gap, and you gotta kill him before you land, or at least you have to hurt him before you land, because otherwise he'll just smack you off.
Which is great, because when I got to the credits and I saw in the credits they show like the computer playing and doing things, I saw him like throw the weapon, and I was like, fuck, I forgot I could do that. It was such a good reveal. I was like, god damn it. But I thought that I think that the balance between the power-ups and the whip, I think it's still pretty good. They don't... Oh, that's right. We were talking about how fair the game is. The game is very fair. I think it is very balanced, and you have tons of options with the whip, and yeah, you can like hang it and dangle it in people's faces or whatever, but you're not really going to win a fight just by dangling the whip. It's very weak. It's good for just like fending off little things like a bullet or a Medusa head or something like that, or if there is like this tricky guy underneath of you and you don't want to go down the steps and get hit, you can just kind of like hang the whip on his face and take him out that way. So I think that the game is definitely very well balanced. I don't really see any issues with it in that regard. Yeah. And I agree with you guys. I think this is, well, I think Randy, your favorite one is Symphony of the Night, so I guess I'm agreeing with Steve that this is, for me, it is my favorite Castlevania.
For me though, it's not like I would say like Symphony is so much better. Oh, I would definitely go Symphony, and then this is like a super close second. But gosh, there was something I wanted to say about fairness and difficulty. Oh yeah. Even for people who actually play the game religiously and who have probably played it religiously throughout their entire lives and stuff, people who play it more than we have, there's always the second quest too. And what I really liked about the game was, as you got closer to Dracula, the monsters actually got harder. So like the skeletons, as they were further away from Dracula, you would hit them once. Like the skeletons, you would hit once and they would explode. But as you were getting closer and closer to Dracula, they would take 2. And then on the second quest, after you complete it, you can play it again, and like the skeletons far away from Dracula take 2, and I think as they get closer to him, it's 3. So even if the game was easy for you the first time around, or if you've gotten used to everything, it still dished out another little bit of challenge for you, so you could keep replaying this game. Which I think is kind of important, because even if you master this game, and I don't think Phil or I could say that we've mastered the game. There was a time when I was younger that I could play through it with one guy, but no more. What was I going to say? Oh, you could knock this game out in an hour and a half to 2 hours if you were fast. And again, if there was a game that cost $50 or $60, which this is how much that game actually cost back in the day when it came out. If there was a game that short for 2 hours right now, they would be... for lack of a better word, they'd be whipped to death for a game that's criminally short.
Which sucks. I actually thought about that too when I played it last night. I was like, I just blitzed through this game in like an hour and 15 minutes. But I mean, it's kind of ingrained in our heads, so we're good at it. But I imagine
your first time through, you would never get through it in 2 hours ever.
Right. But even if it was our first time through, somehow we were able to play it again blindly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that I could probably finish it in like a 3-hour span or something like that. It's not.
Sure.
It's not like overly difficult. So yeah, I was thinking about the length too, and we talk about game length on here plenty of times. But I've been playing Dead Space 2 for Halloween. It's my Halloween game.
Nice.
Which I've never played before, and I've on average I've been playing it like once a week for about an hour and a half usually. I try and get like a decent chunk of it done. So I'd say I'm on chapter 8 of this game. I don't know how many chapters there are. I'm gonna guess I'm like halfway through it. But every time I play it, I'm playing an hour of it, and I'm just kind of progressing this story along. And there's a few times where I die, and I just start right over, and I get over that hurdle immediately, and I move on to the next thing. But I'm not like I'm not retaining any of this game. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why like a game like this game, it's like ingrained in our. We'll never forget it because it is short, but we've played it so many times, and we love it.
But there was a reason why we played it so many times. It was because it was that good. It wasn't because it was like there was nothing else. We had the entire NES library at the time to play.
Right. And I mean, those games are short too. I mean, it's just it's just the way that games are designed these days. They're more designed to just kind of get you from point A to point B, and you're gonna win. You're probably not gonna lose if you keep trying these games, and they don't really stick with you. Like certain sequences do. Like there's been cool parts in Dead Space 2 where I'm like, all right, this is pretty awesome. Like when the shit's hitting the fan or whatever. But I don't know if I reset my game and started playing through it again. Like I don't feel like I'd be any better at it. I don't feel like I'd still be clicking the button to see where I need to go because it's just kind of a blur.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
In terms of the length, this game actually made me think of a very, very modern game was actually Dishonored, where there's a lot of people that are kind of mad about how quickly you can get through Dishonored, because if you know what you're doing, you really can burn through Dishonored pretty quickly. But I think the two games actually have a lot in common, where they both have just a ridiculously high amount of polish. They're both really fun. And if you wanted to, you could play them over again and find different levels of enjoyment depending on how you actually want to play them. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a good amount of similarity between the two of them, which is why when people were slamming Dishonored for its short gameplay, I didn't see that as such a negative because it was such a finely polished game. And it's not like you can burn through it in 2 hours like you can with Castlevania 4. It would take you a lot longer than that. But you know what I mean? The dollar we talk about this on almost every episode. Like the dollar to gaming ratio is important for some games, but I think that when a game is this polished, when a game is this perfect, that dollar to gaming ratio almost goes right out the window.
Right. Even the first Metal Gear Solid, that's probably like a 2-hour game that's extended into an 8-hour game if you take your time and watch everything.
Yeah.
But I love I must have played through the first game a bajillion times, just skipping the cutscenes and just enjoying it and remembering it, and remembering all the stages and stuff like that. And that game, even though that's the game that definitely, that and the Final Fantasies era were the ones that were kind of pushing games towards more like a cinematic, story to story sequence, like. Metal Gear Solid, it's still like a gamey game, if that's the way to say it. Cut out all the bullshit.
There's a good balance of the movie effect to it and the game effect to it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we also look at this, and other guys like us and around our age are going to look at this from the point of view of these are our classics. So for us, we kind of look at it, and I'm not saying that it's not true that they're worth the dollar to enjoyment ratio isn't good, but so like these games for us have stood the test of time. They were $50, $60, 20 years ago or whatever, and but we go back and we play them now 20 years later, and to us they still stand up, but maybe not to someone who's 15 years younger than us who goes back and plays them. And for someone that at that age, the Dead Space 2s, they may 20 years from now be talking about Dead Space 2, and it may totally stand out to them. I don't know, but it might just be our perspective.
I wonder.
That makes
It
it
would be really interesting to see what
Yeah.
the generation after us, what they will consider as their classics kind of thing.
Right.
I'm very curious to see which games will stand the test of time for them.
right.
It's funny, just that, like as an aside, my nephew, my oldest nephew, he is 19. Yeah, 19. His system that he grew up with was N64.
Mhm.
So I'm finding it like I was over his house the other day, his parents' house, and a couple of his 64 games were stacked up, and I'm like seeing the games that he thinks are like in his brain are the the classics. These are the games like Banjo-Kazooie and Pokemon Snap, GoldenEye. There's a couple of them.
Pokemon Snap.
I do love Pokemon Snap. I'll give
Do
him
you
that
really?
one. Oh yeah, it's like I hate Pokemon, but I love Pokemon Snap.
I know your age, but just for the sake, do you mind telling everybody what your age is right now?
My age?
Yeah.
I'm 30.
You're 30. See, I think you were right at that cusp of like the Pokemon. Like you were right in that demographic that Nintendo was targeting for with Pokemon.
I was
Maybe
a little out
on the high end.
I was a little out of it. I can tell you my Pokemon history. I can remember hearing about Pokemon.
Can you show us your Pokemons?
Yeah,
I can
us
show
your
you.
Pokemons.
I can show you my Pokemons.
Let me show us to them.
Because I can say right now,
Here they
that
are.
Steve and I were probably a little bit too old. Like when Pokemon came out, we were probably like, Pokemon, all right, looks fun for the kids, but I'm too old for that right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
Never mind.
I was totally like that. Yep.
Never mind. Steve was not that. I take
Steve,
it.
I want to know about your Pokemon.
I still
next.
watch Pokemon every morning now with my 8-year-old daughter.
So
I think
yeah,
it's funny because your nephew, you're talking about your nephew. Like that was the reason why I was not that big into Pokemon, because my nephew was really into it. I'm like, my nephew's really into it.
Yeah, if he likes it, then no, my nephew loved it then too. I remember, but I can remember hearing, I was up on this stuff, so I knew Pokemon existed before it came here. I knew it was huge, and I knew it was Nintendo. So I mean, when it was coming
the show
here,
that was giving everybody seizures. Too.
yeah, of course, that was big news too.
Monsters.
Yeah, before it came here. So I knew I couldn't wait for this game because it sounded like it was going to be something I loved. And then I think, if I remember properly, they actually had started showing the TV show here first before they launched the game. And I watched a few episodes of that, and I was like, "Oh, I don't know, this is kind of dumb." And I was really in the anime at that point. You could show me any fucking anime on the planet at that point, I probably would have loved it.
Lensman.
Yeah. So I didn't dig the show, and then the game came out, and I was working at KB Toys at the time. I think it was, I'm gonna say, 97 maybe 98.
Yeah, it was about
Sounds about right.
around that point.
And I bought Pokemon Red the day it came out. I still have my copy. I still have my mint box copy. I played it for like 8 hours, and I was like, "This is a hobby. This is this is grinding.
It's true.
You need to just fucking grind." And I was done. That was it. 8 hours of Pokemon is all of my Pokemon experience. I've never tried it again. That was it.
Yeah, I feel like we've
I love
had this
Pokemon
conversation before on like a previous podcast. I don't think it was Game Club. It might have been another podcast. But I remember having the
Really?
conversation about Pokemon being a hobby and not
Yeah,
not,
it
not
is
a
a
video
hobby.
game.
On its own, it is a hobby.
And that's
It
how
is.
things like that. To me, that's how things like World of Warcraft are, and
Yeah.
even to some
even
extent.
Call of Duty multiplayer.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, even
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it's definitely something other than like just playing a game.
Yeah, it's like I play video games and I play Pokemon.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
don't. By the
it's
way,
like-
just kind of as a sub note here, because there are 1,000 million Pokemon fans out there who are probably just outside my window right now with pitchforks and torches, ready to kill me. I'm not saying that I dislike Pokemon, because
Oh, yeah.
I don't dislike Pokemon. It's just that it wasn't. I didn't feel like it was my market, but I get it though. Like I had friends in college, like when I was a junior or so. Like I had friends who were freshmen. They were just figuring out like what Final Fantasy was at the time, and they were like, "Oh, I get it. Fantasy is
Right.
like Pokemon but more serious, and I was just kind of like, no, other way around.
Yeah.
Going back to the point about my nephew and like classic games or whatever. So, I have become pretty hard on that generation of games as I got older. I don't think something like Banjo-Kazooie is a classic. I loved Banjo-Kazooie when it came out, and I played ungodly amount of hours. But Banjo-Kazooie is not a good game.
I had them put their pitchforks and torches away. What are you doing?
Sorry, I'm sorry, man.
Yeah.
I love Rare. I miss Rare so much, but there are only N64 games that have probably withstood the test of time. Is Blast Corps? No, Perfect Dark is
Dude,
shit.
Blast Corps was a awesome game. I was about to say a blast, but that would have been redundant. Yeah. Blast Corps was awesome.
Yeah, Blast Corps, and I'll give them Killer Instinct Gold. People would probably kill me for that one, but there's nothing else really like that on N64. Yeah, a lot of their stuff is not aged right. And I could play GoldenEye multiplayer. I could still play that.
A lot of games from that era, from the
A lot
Nintendo
of
64, have not aged well. I mean, quite frankly, there's not a whole
No.
lot that you could name. On this
No,
system.
not really.
I could go off on Zelda 64 for a while, but that would certainly get me
No, that game's great.
egged.
That game's still great. Sorry, dude.
No, wait, dude. No, I will continually say that the best Zelda game in the entire series was Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past, and I will stand and say forever
I could
that
give you
Zelda
that.
64 is just a three-dimensional version of Link to the Past.
Well, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That
But
doesn't make it a better game. Just because it's in 3 dimensions, you can play like a much more refined game in 2 dimensions.
I agree with that. But I think I don't want to get into a whole thing. But I think
Since we're supposed to be talking about Castlevania.
I know.
4.
I think Zelda 64 and I think Majora's Mask in particular. I don't know. I could go on all day about this, but but I see your point. I could easily give you A Link to the Past and not argue with you.
But you know what, though? Honestly, I think that actually stands a lot to say about Super Castlevania. That we're so easily able to get off track about it because we all know that we loved this game. That the music was perfect. That the controls are dead on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the jumping controls. It was probably the first jumping control scheme that a Castlevania had, where you could control the character in midair. Because Castlevania's 1 through 3, if you hit jump into the right, you were flying to the right.
Yeah, and listen, I like that. I actually
there is definitely room for that, but I'm
Right.
saying this is the first one where you had control over it.
right. And this game, and I think the game works to it's balanced. It doesn't. I'm sorry. I'm like my thoughts are
I know what you're
scrambled.
saying.
But go on.
The game is tailored towards that control scheme.
Exactly.
Like
Exactly.
and there was a bunch of other really cool elements that it actually introduced. It introduced landing and jumping on stairs, which you couldn't do before.
Yeah.
It introduced 8-directional whipping, which you could not do before. And in fact, a couple of games afterwards, you couldn't even do that.
Mm-hmm. No, you couldn't. I think it's like the only Castlevania where you can whip like that.
Yeah, because all the
Bloodlines
Symphony
on
of the Night
Genesis, I think you kind of can on Bloodlines.
Really?
I think
There
so.
was
Bloodlines
one of the
is great, by
GBA
the
ones.
way.
I can't remember if it was Bloodlines, where you couldn't dangle the whip, but if you held on to the button, he would spin it
Oh
around
yeah,
like
it was
a
Circle
nunchuck.
of the Moon was the first. Yeah,
that what it
You
was?
could do that. Yeah, it's the first GBA one. We should next year. We should do Bloodlines. Did you guys ever play that one for Genesis?
No.
No, you know what? I've always wanted to play Bloodlines, and I think it's a great idea for next year.
Yeah, we should do that because it's awesome. And if somebody told me they like Bloodlines more than Super Castlevania 4, I'd probably groan a little bit, but I would give it to them. Because it is fucking awesome. It is good. Those guys
Fine.
made here's a preview to next year's conversation. Those guys made the Genesis do shit that it wasn't even supposed to do. Like, it's crazy shit. It's good.
And I'll tell you what. In another kind of nod towards Super Castlevania 4, one of the biggest reasons why I was really excited about God, why am I blanking on the name? The newest one, Shadow of Darkness. No.
Lords of Shadow?
Lords of Shadow, thank you. The reason why I was like really excited about it, everybody kind of got jazzed and like the media just started flaring up when they were like, "Oh, Kojima's gonna be working on it." I don't care that Kojima's working on a Castlevania game. I don't give a crap. But when they were like, "Oh yeah, this is This is the spiritual successor, or this is they said that Super Castlevania 4 was the spiritual inspiration for this game. And they even did, like, one of the trailers, they actually used the intro music for the intro music for Super Castlevania 4. That was what really got me into that. That's what got me excited about that game, was Super Castlevania 4. So, yeah. I think I said something there. I think that there was.
I just wanted to point out that I think Shadows of
Continue,
Darkness might
hopefully.
be the best, one of the best doesn't exist subtitles for a game I've ever heard.
Shadows of Darkness. Lords of Shadow.
Yeah, I like that
Yeah.
though. Shadows of Darkness. Someone's got to make a game and call it Shadows of Darkness.
Lords of Shadow, by the way, on a side note, is actually all the vampire killer themes. I think that one's my favorite one because it's done in a music box.
Are you talking about Lords of Shadow, the way the music's done?
Yeah.
On the music box stage? I'm
Yeah.
sorry. You guys just came back in. That's why I was quiet.
Oh, no. I was saying, like, because, like, the vampire killer theme, my favorite ones that it actually existed on were Castlevania 3, 4, and then actually Lords of Shadow because of the music box. I think the music box idea for it was perfect.
Yeah, that was cool. Lords of Shadow is a cool game. That game gets kind of shit on, and it's got, like, some bad parts, but I think as a whole, it's a pretty cool game. I definitely like it.
Yeah.
And I'm pumped for the second one.
Me too.
Yeah. Definitely excited for that one. I guess I just love Castlevania. I want to play through the 64 ones again.
Why?
Because
your misery level running a little low?
No, I don't. In my brain right now, they're not as bad as people make them out to be. But maybe they are. Maybe they are that bad.
I think you're better off playing the PS2 ones.
No, they're better than. I could make the case right now that they're better than the PS2 ones.
Yeah, all right,
I could.
Rank them. Like now that we've played. Last year we did Symphony, and this year we did this one. Like, how do your favorite top 5 Castlevanias? Where do they fall, guys?
Oh, that's hard, man. I don't
Really?
know.
You can even whittle down a top 3.
I mean, this is definitely my favorite.
This one's 1 for you.
Yeah, and then maybe I would say 2 would be my second favorite.
Really?
Yeah, I really like 2 a lot. I know it's kind of a not one that people like a lot, but I really enjoyed it.
That's all right, man. I think that's a good answer, man.
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
And then maybe Symphony after that.
Yeah.
Phil's grown, and then I'll give it to you.
No,
All right.
I'll give them 2. I like 2. I like 2.
I could definitely go Symphony and then 4 and then probably 3. And then, believe it or not, Lords of Shadow is pretty high on there, I have to say. Yeah, I really do. Like I said, 1 I thought was really cool. If I ever see an upright cabinet of 1 and I had a pocket full of quarters, I would lose my money into it. Because everybody knows back then, whenever you found like an arcade version of a game that existed on a console, the arcade version was 99.9% always going to be better, And I always loved the arcade version of the original Castlevania.
Well, I can tell you that the arcade version, if you play it now, is not that great.
Really? I remember that the biggest thing that like always whooped my ass on that was I almost always ran out of time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's cool because it's Castlevania, but I'd say it's probably broken.
Ouch.
Yeah, but all right, top 5. Oh man,
Just do a top 3.
you got to understand how much I love Castlevania here. All right, I would give it. I go like maybe 4, 1, Symphony, and then maybe like 3, and then Bloodlines.
Yeah. None of the
And
GBAs or DS
And
ones?
then I really like a lot of the GBA and DS ones,
Yeah.
but I just played through a lot of them actually fairly recently, like the 2 of the GBA ones I played through recently. But those are like cool, but I feel none of them were as good as Symphony.
Yeah, they all feel like Symphony clones, but didn't quite live up to its greatness.
Right. I think the 2 of them on DS, Dawn of Sorrow, which is I think the first one, is really good, and then the last one, which was with the girl. Shit, the name is slipping.
Shadow of Darkness.
No. It's right behind me. I can't see it. I see the box. I can't read it.
I
from
will
here.
laugh my ass off if they ever make a Castlevania game in the future called Castlevania Shadows of Darkness. I will laugh
It
my
probably exists. Probably that one that where you whip. There's an arcade one where you whip that came out in Japan. I don't think it came out here. That's probably what it's called. That one, but the last DS one is actually really cool too. I like that a lot. But
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd throw it up into the favorites. I definitely prefer action 2D Castlevania versus Metroidvania.
Yeah, I
And
do too.
the WiiWare one's kind of cool if you guys ever checked it out. It's
Never
neat.
did.
I never got around to checking that one
It's
out.
like the old ones. It's a 2D one, but it's cool. It's worth trying. All right. Sorry.
How about that?
Oh man, you guys are cutting out on me again.
Are you still
what
there,
about
bad
Phil?
luck
Phil,
tonight.
did you cut out again?
But
I think we might have lost Phil for a second.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm back.
Oh yeah, no, it's
okay,
okay.
cool.
I thought it was a little strange that you just kind of stopped. That's why I was kind of had like that awkward moment there. But
I'm sorry.
so
My audio.
let's give our final thoughts on Castlevania. I think we've pretty much hit everything, but
It's a classic. It's amazing. Go play it.
Yeah, it's a classic, one of the best soundtracks of all time, and it'll be tough to top it. And like you said, it is one of the core SNES games, and if somebody said a top 10 of SNES games, it would probably land in the top 5.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah, I agree on all points. Yeah, it's Halloween. It's the spooky time of year. People like doing spooky stuff, and this is certainly a good game. So if you have not played it, if you missed out, and you have the means to play it, you definitely should check it out. It's a classic.
Don't
Yeah.
emulate it on your phone with a touch screen.
Oh
That's just terrible.
no, please.
No.
I don't even want to hear about that kind of shit going on. Nope. Unless it's on your iPod XL, then by all means. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean the iPad Mini. Whatever. Anyway, so next time on the Game Club, we're going to be playing Escapegoat, and that is it's not a free-to-play game. It's you have to buy it now. It's $5. If you go to playescapegoat.com, you can play a nice demo of the game. Should give you a pretty good idea of what it's all about. It's what would you say, Phil? Puzzle platformer.
Puzzle
We need
platformer.
to change the name of this podcast to the Puzzle Platformer Cast or something.
Indie puzzle platformer cast.
Yeah.
Club.
This one's cool, and it actually is a good
No,
follow.
it is good.
It's a good follow-up because it's kind of got some similar tone to Super Castlevania in a way.
Nice.
So
And despite the fact that it is a puzzle platformer, it is not one that has some fucking wonky physics engine bullshit. It works. So
it's a puzzle platformer in the purest sense
yes.
of the word. It's definitely very cool, and like I said, you can play it for free, guys. Go over to playescapegoat.com. There's a demo on there that I don't know how. At one point, you could play through the entire game for free on there.
Yeah,
but they've
there was a free
changed it,
weekend.
and I think now it's a limited amount that you can play, and then the game itself is $5. It's got some cool music you should check out as well, and it's a neat title. So I'm looking forward to playing it and talking about it on the show. I think it's going to be a good one.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. I think it's been on the. I think it's been on the list too for a while.
Yeah,
Game Club
well, a
unofficial
few months
list.
ago, right, was the first time I remember us talking about it
Mhm.
offline, not on the show, but in our normal daily conversations.
Yeah.
Yeah. So please check it out. It'll be good. So yeah, all right, let's wrap this one up. Episode number 34 in the can. Head on over to iTunes and the Zune Marketplace if you want to check out an audio version of this show. For the people who may be watching it on YouTube, you can subscribe to us there, and you can get that on your MP3 player or whatever of choice. And we're also on Stitcher Radio, which is a nice way to listen to us if you're on an Android phone. They have a nice little app. You can get podcasts and stuff on there and look us up on Stitcher Radio. And iTunes and Zune reviews, we would greatly appreciate them. It helps us out. with rankings on those marketplaces and gets more people aware of the show and listening and hopefully submitting their feedback. So we would really appreciate any support you guys can give us in that regard. And for all you folks on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button up there and subscribe to the Elder Geek channel. And head over to eldergeek.com, where you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter. There's also a Twitch TV channel where I'll let Randy tell you what's going on with that right now.
Right now, and actually until the very end of the month, so October 31st, we're actually doing our Friday Night Creature Feature Charity Marathon for Child's Play. Pretty much every Friday, if you happen to be seeing this before Friday, every Friday we have streamed horror games, and all the donations that we've been collecting have been going directly to Child's Play. We've had some great giveaways from Gamersgate, and it's just been a really good time. I think this Friday is actually going to be the last one, and I'm going to be playing Deadlight, and I believe either Resident Evil 1 and 2 or 2. So there you have it.
Cool. Yes, go check it out. So that about does it for this episode of the Elder Geek Game Club. Thank you very much for listening and checking us out, and please look forward to the next episode in 2 weeks, which will be a Scapegoat.
Yeah.
We will.
Awesome. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween. We'll see you guys then.